He sat at the tax booth, despised by his people, seen as a traitor, a sinner, an outcast, yet Jesus looked at him and said 2 words, "Follow me." And Matthew rose, left everything, and followed. From tax collector to apostle, from record keeper to gospel writer, Matthew's life was transformed by grace. His journey ended far from Galilee in Ethiopia, where he laid down his life for Christ, slain by the blade of a halberd. This is his story. Matthew the tax collector. Matthew, also called Levi, was born in Nazareth, but by the time of Jesus' ministry, he was living in Capernaum, working as a toll gatherer. Tax collectors were hated in Jewish society. They worked for Rome, collecting tolls and customs, often enriching themselves through dishonesty. Matthew knew rejection. To his neighbors he was a collaborator with the enemy, to the Pharisees he was unclean, but to Jesus, he was chosen. When Jesus said, "Follow me," Matthew immediately left his booth and followed. Grace saw what others despised. A new beginning. Matthew's response was immediate and wholehearted. He held a feast in his house, inviting fellow tax collectors and sinners to meet Jesus. When criticized, Jesus replied, "I came not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." Here we see the contrast of law and grace. The law marked Matthew as an outcast. Grace welcomed him as a disciple. The law excluded him. Grace gave him a new beginning. Author of the Gospel. Tradition holds that Matthew wrote his Gospel in Hebrew or Aramaic first, later translated into Greek. His Gospel is rich with Old Testament quotations, showing Jesus as the fulfillment of prophecy, the Messiah promised to Israel. Matthew alone records the Sermon on the Mount in full, the Great Commission, and parables that reveal the kingdom of heaven. Once a man who recorded taxes, he became the man who recorded the words of the King. Missionary Journeys. After Pentecost, Matthew carried the gospel beyond Israel. Ancient traditions say he labored in Parthia, lands stretching into modern-day Iran, and later in Ethiopia. His mission was to proclaim Christ where he was not known, to bring the gospel to Gentile nations far from Galilee. Martyrdom in Ethiopia. In the city of Nadaba, Ethiopia, Matthew's preaching stirred opposition. Refusing to deny Christ or worship the local gods, he was arrested. Around AD 60 he was slain by a halberd, a polearm with a long axe blade and spear point. From tax booth to gospel witness, from pen to sword, Matthew's life ended in faithfulness. The law condemned him as a traitor to Rome and to pagan traditions. Grace received him as a faithful servant of Christ. Law marked him as a sinner, an outcast, and later condemned him as a criminal in Ethiopia. Grace called him to follow, transformed him into a disciple, entrusted him to record the life of Christ, and crowned him in martyrdom. Law said, "You are guilty, unclean, unwanted." Grace said, "You are chosen, forgiven, and faithful unto death." Devotional Reflection. Matthew teaches us that no one is beyond Christ's call. A despised tax collector became a gospel writer. The one rejected by men was chosen by God. His story also reminds us that following Jesus means leaving everything behind. Matthew left his income, his booth, his old life. In the end, he even left his life itself, laying it down for Christ in Ethiopia. From beginning to end, his story is one of transformation by grace. Matthew's life asks us, what are you holding on to? What booth have you built? Security, comfort, sin, that Jesus is calling you to leave behind. Pray today, Lord, give me Matthew's courage to leave all for you, to proclaim you with my words, and to remain faithful even unto death. And remember, the same Christ who called Matthew at a tax booth calls you today. Follow him, record his words on your heart, and live as his witness, no matter the cost.